there, weary traveler. I heard you're new in town. Come on, we'll show you around.
Welcome to Bantam West. If this is your first game mode, we need to get you situated, show you how things work around here. Here's your intro to-do list.
Each time you see this icon, it represents one notoriety point. So each task listed is worth 1 NP. As your notoriety increases, the townsfolk begin to speak of your guts and cunning. In the warm welcome game mode, the first player to score 4 notoriety points by completing these 4 tasks wins.
So we're going to show you how to buy a horse, but first let's go ahead and set up this world properly so you know exactly where and how to buy a horse. This is Gallow Springs, and it's the only civilized town on the Death Helm frontier. When you leave town to the north, notice the boxed silver symbol. If you move beyond this acre, you'll end up in the mountains. Referring to side B of the Warm Welcome game mode card, you'll see that you place the mountains tile here. Make sure that all the tiles you place in the setup have side A facing up. Now if you exit town to the south, you're actually heading to Croco Wetlands, which you can put right below the previous tile. From there are only 4 shops that you'll need to set up around Gallow Springs for the Warm Welcome mode. First up is the Saloon, Miss B's Haven.
Then it's Gatman Gunsmith. Here you'll want to take all 30 weapons cards. These have the blue, gray, and purple backgrounds. Remove all 8 legendary weapons, which are the ones with the purple background. Shuffle these 8 and place 4 of them with all the other weapons. The other 4 can go back in the box. This deck you'll place on the weapon rack and then flip the top 6 cards face up. This tells you which weapons are in stock. This is how you'll create and set up the weapon rack in all game modes.
Below Gatman Gunsmith, you'll finish off this area by placing Rita's Outpost here and Merce Mounts below that. This is where you buy your horses. Shuffle all the mount cards and place them face down in the mount slot on the stables tile.
Now you'll spawn the enemies for Warm Welcome. You want to shuffle the bandit tokens, the pumas, the gators, and the wolves all separately. Now you'll place a bandit at each campsite. So one is going to be at the Southern Lorne Range camp, one is going to be at Croco Wetlands camp, and then there's a gator in the marshes, a wolf in the cave, and a puma sneaking around the top of the mountain cliffs. You also want to randomly place a chest token here in the mountains. You also want to place another chest at the vault. Shuffle the orange predator deck and the red bandit decks separately. You want to keep them off to the side for now. And then you can put all the resources close by. And that's the table setup. From there, we're going to set up each of our individual characters and then we're ready to go.
First, you'll need your character mini with a match and snap base of whatever color you choose. Please note that this is a prototype version of the game, but your copy should come with a colored base.
Then a character is going to get slotted right here. There are 9 combat cards with your character's name on it, 1 cargo catalog. The remaining 6 checkmark tokens, even though you'll need only 4 for Warm Welcome. You also will need 1 die of a matching color, 3 cabin pieces will get slotted here, 3 cabin cards, and 3 cabin door tiles that matches your character. You also need 1 of each type of endeavor. These cards will get slotted here at the top of the board with only the novice level of the card exposed.
You'll also need 4 grit tokens, and you can choose to have the tobacco or the coffee side facing up. 11 skill cubes of matching color. These cubes, you place them depending on what it says on the back of your character card. And 2 black limiter cubes just tell you what your maximum stat is. If the stat is adjusted due to wounds, illness, or any random events, the slot next to the limited remains the original stat level. The 2 stats that use the limiter cubes are vigor and speed.
If you're playing as Levi, he comes with 3 ammo box tokens.
If you're playing as Hannah, she comes with 3 ladder tokens. Now in true Bantam spirit, it's customary to introduce all of your characters before diving into gameplay.
First up, we have Mika Mankiller. Those who don't know her name might know her instead as Cool Water. Don't worry about her past, for she is soon to move on to a new life. For those who could keep up, they were known by some as the Shadows of Doubt. Mika was last seen in the Gallow Springs train station, and she lives by one saying, "Take what's yours." Next up, we have Jericho Jones, who hails from the Pequot Sands of Madera's sandbar, and some folks there call him Little Cisco. Jericho is a businessman and a reformed street fighter, and those that heed his mentorship are known as the Merchants Guild. He was last seen in the trading post, and he truly believes that everything has a price. Levi Mercer. His troops once called him the Marauder. He's an army deserter turned outlaw and leads a militia known as the Lone Rangers. Levi was last seen in the Gallow Springs jail, and he ended up there because he bends the knee to no man. Last up is Hannah Wild, also known as Big Sis. She can fight and has rolled with the toughest in her life as a bandit leader. Her crew is known as Spitfire Swarm, and they earned that name for good reason. Hannah was last seen in the saloon, and she knows that in her beating heart, fire cleanses all. There is plenty of information on the back of the character card and even on the player board that can help you better understand who they are and help you see through the eyes of your deadly stranger. Okay, we know that you have to race to complete this intro to-do list. On your turn, you have 4 available action points to use during the day phase. Those are referred to as grits, as shown by our 4 grit tokens, which you can choose to show the tobacco side or the coffee side. Every time we use an action, we move a token to the fatigue ticket.
One player takes day phase actions until they run out of grit or choose to pass. Then, turn order moves clockwise from there.
And some actions cost no grit. You can see a list of all actions and their descriptions on the reference cards. First player is whoever most recently watched a Western movie or whoever is the oldest player.
Let's break down some of the main actions you can take in Bantam West. When you start your turn, you look at your character card and see where you begin. You can check the last seen location. This is important. Your character mini isn't even on the board until your first turn starts. This prevents grieving, aka anyone trying to fight you before your turn even starts.
Okay, first off, let's go ahead and talk about the shops. Now, each shop has no grit actions. These are called store actions, and they're listed in the translucent boxes on the day side of the town hall tile. Anytime you see an action listed in a translucent box, it's going to cost you no grit at all. On the other hand, actions that do cost grit, these are called store interactions, and they're listed in the white boxes at the bottom of each store tile.
Let's go visit the local saloon run by Melissa Zinn and see what we can do there.
Howdy, I'm Melissa Zinn. Welcome to my saloon, Ms. B's Haven. To perform a store action such as buying a drink, your character mini must be in the store.
Howdy, Ms. B. I'll take a Gallow Springs, please.
Coming right up.
As you can see on the town tile at the saloon, you can buy drinks as a no-grit store action. There, you can also mount heads and recruit riders in the advanced game modes. But we will talk about those when you play the Shadow Governors mode.
If you don't want to pay for a drink, you can always spend a grit and try to demand one instead.
So if you want to demand a drink at Miss B's Haven, you'll have to spend 1 grit during the day. And then this triangle means you have to pass a skill check. To pass a skill check, you just look at your skill with the matching color. In this case, my malice is 4 for Hannah, plus my dice roll of 6, which is 10, which is more than 7. So I pass this check.
If you failed the skill check, look at the red symbol to the left of the store interaction because it'll tell you what happens to you. Like here, you will lose 1 vigor. Now for the second action, you can gain a discount by spending 1 grit and performing a persuasion skill check shown by the purple triangle. If you don't pass the persuasion check, you would get kicked out of the saloon and pushed to 1 acre away in any direction you choose.
Hope you enjoy your time at Miss B's Haven. Next up, let's visit Gatman, Gunsmith & Co. Here's where you buy your weapons from Strap Gatman himself.
Just like at the saloon and any other store in town, you can take the no grit actions listed on the town tile or 1 grit actions listed at the bottom of the store tile. Performing an agility check to pull off a gun trick successfully means you can take any common gray weapon for free. Then there's performing a persuasion check to get a $1 discount or equal trade. This means that you can discard resources, items, or even other weapons that equal that weapon's amount. To check how much resources are worth, check with Rita LaRue at Rita's Outpost. The trading post is where you can buy and sell resources and even sell the heads of enemies that you defeat. You can also perform a sneak check to steal from Rita, which will get you 1 free resource of your choosing. But if you get caught and fail that skill test, this symbol means you're going straight to jail. The other grit interaction is a persuasion check to trade 1 resource for any other resource. Keep in mind, if you look at her menu, the resources all have a barrel icon like wood, herbs, hides, and silver. Anything besides those 4 are not resources, like gems and heads.
Last stop for now is Mirth's Mounts, where you can buy horses from Mirth Greymane.
You can try using a strength check to break a horse, which will get you 1 free horse. You could also try a persuasion check in order to negotiate a $1 discount or equal trade just like the weapons. Now again, this means that you can trade in a resource or a weapon of equal value, like trading in a Serenity that's worth $5 in order for you to draw one random mount for free. Anytime you trade something in, just place it in the supply. Okay, so what we've talked about so far is how you interact with the shops. Let's go ahead and talk about a couple of other places around town. If you want to loot a chest from the vault, you have to sneak around to the back of the bank and use a weapon with the entry tool icon or any weapon that has an orange key icon to enter the vault. Then use another entry tool to open the chest. This doesn't cost grit to perform, but you do exhaust the item by turning it 90 degrees. This just means that you can't use it again until it gets refitted during the night phase. In this mode, you can also ignore the town hall and bank for now until you get to the advanced mode. We'll also talk about jail and dock once we get into combat, and those are also in town as well. So after getting a drink, Hannah now wants to move out of the saloon. For every grit spent on a move action, you can move up to as many acres as your speed stat, which in this case is 3. So you can spend 1 grit to move 1, 2, 3 spaces from acre to acre along their connecting trails to the acre showing the Croco Wetlands location icon. Then Hannah spends a 2nd grit on another move action to the acre showing the town location icon on the Croco Wetlands terrain tile. From there, you can still move up to 2 more acres.
Can you choose not to move up to your full speed, take an action, and then move again?
Yes, you can. You can take as many movement actions during your turn as your grit can afford.
Also, if you're ever mid-action and decide to do another action, the remainder of the previous action is cancelled.
Throughout the frontier, you'll see that there are also black dashed lines. These are hidden trails like in the cave system, so you'll need to exhaust a torch by turning it sideways or any other item that displays the golden key icon in its SPC slot to travel through the dark cave. Sometimes when you're moving outside of town, you'll see a dashed red line leading away from a skill check. This line is where your character ends up if you fail the skill check tied to a movement action, like jumping the falls in the Southern Lorraine Range. If your character tried to jump the waterfall but you failed the skill check, you'll wash up downstream and receive 1 wound. And that's movement. Look at your speed, which will tell you how fast you can go. Spend 1 grit and move up to as many acres as equal to your speed.
Alright, we now know how to move and we know how the shops around town work. And Hannah has now spent 3 grit demanding a drink and stumbling out onto an herb patch in the Croco Wetlands. Remember that the whole point of this game mode is to complete the 4 tasks on your to-do list. So now the question is, how do we make the $5 needed in order to check off the very first item on your intro to-do list? Buy a horse. Now a quick side note, you can choose to accomplish the intro to-do list tasks in any order you want. Now a great way to make money and gain resources is a grit action called endeavoring. There are 4 types of endeavors in Bantam West, but they all work the same way. You can perform that type of endeavor in an acre displaying its matching icon. You want to look at the top left of the card, and don't forget that each endeavor will also tell you a restriction, like for a logging novice, you can only have 1 cabin at a time. All players will start each game as a novice for all endeavors. Hannah will now roll the 2 black endeavor dice to determine how successful her endeavor attempt is. In this case, Hannah has to roll a 4 or higher in order to successfully forage an herb. Each die represents a separate attempt. They are not combined together. Bam! Hannah rolls double 6s. What a roll! With those 2 herbs that she gains, she can either 1, place them in a resource slot here on the cargo catalog, or a mount card if she had one, or 2, at any time only during your turn, you can dedicate that resource towards leveling the endeavor. Okay, your level of endeavor is listed here. And to level up your endeavor, the cost is given here. You may dedicate the resource type displayed by placing them near the cost listed. Now once you have enough resources, you're going to return those to the supply and then pull the card up from novice to journeyman. Now this is important, don't forget this, but whenever you dedicate a resource to leveling, you cannot take them back. The other 3 endeavors work exactly the same way, they just have different difficulties, perks, uses, and they're harvested in different areas. They also sell for different amounts in town. Once you become a master, like an herbalist for foraging for instance, you turn the card to the backside and gain a ton of powerful benefits. You can then take the resources that you have in your inventory and sell them to Rita while you are in her trading post. This right here is how you make money. So if I sell her 3 herbs for $3 and 1 silver for $2, that's going to make me $5. That is the exact amount I need in order to buy a horse from Mirth. Now if you had a bad roll, you can re-roll 1 die by spending 1 willpower and moving this cube down 1 slot. The downside is the more willpower you spend, then the closer you get to injuring yourself, because if you reach this red square, you'll take 1 wound. You can actually spend multiple willpower by re-rolling the same failed roll. But let's say you want to gain willpower back. Then you'll need to use the 4th grit action, Reflection. You take time to meditate by spending 1 grit and gain 1 willpower for each grit that you spend. There's also a second way to gain willpower back aside from Reflection, and that's from sleeping during the night phase, which we'll get to towards the end of this video. Alright, you now know how to endeavor and gather items on the frontier, and also level up those endeavors. You also know how to fix your bad die rolls by mitigating them using willpower. Now, let's figure out the next item on your to-do list, how to build a cabin. Building a cabin is a grit action that'll cost 3 logs. Once spent, you want to take a cabin from your player board and build it on the acre that you're currently in. You may only build on acres that display resource icons, because you gotta build where the land yields a decent harvest. Next, you'll take a cabin card and put it to the side of the terrain tile where you just built it and in line with the cabin piece. Finally, you'll put your character's corresponding door tile with the locked side facing up. Now the question is, why do you want to build a cabin? Aside from it being the second item on the intro to-do list, they give you a ton of benefits. Cabins give you a notoriety point in the advanced game modes. They also give you land dominance because no one else can endeavor in this space while the door is locked besides the owner. While endeavoring, the owner can even use the resource slots on the cabin card as an extension of their own storage. Cabins also generate one of the resources that they're built on every single night. They restore the amount of vigor and willpower listed each night, and they also provide shelter from range attacks and weather. Cabins will also act as a spawn point for the owner. Each character's cabin card also offers a unique perk. Now, while the cabin is locked, the owner can freely move between the cabin card and the acre where it's located without taking a movement action. You can only do this on your turn and not during fights. The only way for another player to enter someone else's cabin is to breach it to unlock the door tile or use the climb in, climb out action until the owner repairs it. To breach a cabin, you'll either need to exhaust an item that displays the entry tool icon in its SPC slot in order to attempt the sneak skill check, or just attempt a strength check in order to bash in the door. Once someone does, the door tile gets flipped to the unlocked side and the cabin owner has to spend a log to fix it. If a cabin is unlocked, everyone can freely move between the cabin card and the acre where it's located without even using a movement action, and anyone can endeavor on the land. The cabin's owner can't sell the cabin or release to the cabin from Dock Barber or jail while it's unlocked. And anyone, including the cabin owner, must now spend 1 grit and 1 log while they're at the cabin or inside it to fix the door and then flip the tile back over. You can still climb into a player's cabin while keeping the door tile intact by passing the agility skill check displayed on the card. But if that cabin is still locked, you'll have to attempt the agility check again in order to climb back out. So you can actually set fire to another player's cabin, but the thing is, if it gets destroyed, that cabin piece and the cabin card is gonna go back to your player board.
Wait.
Hold up.
Did you say fire?
I did, but we're gonna talk all about fire in Shadow Governors. Now, one of the most exciting parts about Bantam West is combat. How does combat work?
Technically, you can remove person versus person or PvP from the game if you're not fighting each other.
Without PvP, the game would still function at its full capacity, but for those brave enough to pay respect to a time mode tradition on Bantam, here's how fighting works. To fight, you first need to see if your target is within line of sight. You've seen how all the acres have a different color. Now, if an acre has a matching color with an adjacent acre, then that means that those acres are within line of sight to each other. Now, once an acre changes to a different color, you can't see that far away or something is obstructing your view, and now you're no longer in line of sight. If you see a black acre, those are hidden acres, aka they do not share any line of sight with any other acres. The only way another player can see you in a hidden acre is if they are in that same exact acre, which is in range of 0. Hidden acres that display a skill check may be entered, but require a sneak check in order to do so without receiving a wound, like the briar patch in the Croco wetlands. White acres are called shelter acres, and they only share line of sight with colors that are immediately adjacent to it. Now, shelter acres have a white outline that displays a skill check on the outline. If you are attacked with a long-ranged weapon while in a shelter acre, you can attempt the shelter roll listed in order to cancel the wound. The lower the number, the better the shelter. Now, from within the shelter, you can still target someone outside of the shelter freely. If you do not have any weapons or combat cards with a range greater than 0 and you want to start a fight, then that means that your target must be in a range of 0, aka they have to be in the same acre. And then they also have to spend 1 grit in order to start a fight action. We'll talk all about ranged weapons right after reviewing the basics of fighting, starting now.
We're here in the bitter cold of the southern Lauren Range. Even though Jericho sustained a wound and frostbite last night on his last turn, Jericho wants to start a fight with Levi in hopes of looting the gems and silver he's been mining. Now, Levi wants to keep his resources safe until he can sell them at Rita's outpost, so Levi is trying to break line of sight so he can end this fight as soon as possible. Both fighters are starting with 2 vigor. First, Jericho spends 1 grit to move 3 acres into the same acre as Levi. He then spends another 1 grit to initiate the fight. Because Jericho is starting the fight, he assumes the role of the attacker and Levi assumes the role of the defender. As attacker, Jericho's card effects always execute first, then Levi's cards. Both quickly shuffle all of their combat cards and weapon cards together, draw 4 cards into their hand, and choose 1 to play. The chosen cards are placed on the table face down and side by side. Both players count 3, 2, 1, and reveal their cards simultaneously. Jericho reveals Tackle, Levi reveals a Brawl. Cards are read from top to bottom, then left to right. The 2 icons on the top left are essentially a rock, paper, scissors portion of the fight. Cards will cancel each other out, so if you look at the icons on the top left of Brawl, it shows that Brawl cancels Tackle. This means Levi's card is still in play, but Jericho's card cannot be used. Now remember, every combat card has an alt action of move 1 that's not shown on the card. Levi can use the primary action to deal 1 damage, but he wants to evade the fight, so Levi uses the card's alternate action of move 1. Since he's still within line of sight of Jericho, the fight will keep going. Vigor equals Jericho 2, Levi 2. The first engagement of the fight is now over and both players draw back up to 4 cards. Draw, pick, 3, 2, 1, play. Boom! Jericho reveals Disciplined Aggression and Levi reveals a block. This time, no card is cancelled. Since Jericho is the attacker, he executes first. Jericho chooses to exhaust his card and attempt the card's special. Some weapons have a special, which you can use in or out of combat at no grit cost. All that is required to use a card special is to exhaust the card. You can use a card special with the prim, or primary action on its own, but you can never use a primary or special and an alternate action together. This is super important. If there is an icon displaying a buff on the SPC slot, then that number acts as a modifier for any dice rolls related to that effect. This is how you read the card. If you pass a strength check of 7, Jericho immediately chooses how his opponent uses their card. Jericho goes for a strength check and succeeds.
You're going to use your alt and take 1 step closer.
Now keep in mind, Jericho can't use the exhausted card again for any reason until it gets refitted during the night phase. So that means Jericho will place Disciplined Aggression off to the side for now. Vigor, Jericho 2, Levi 2. The end of the second engagement of the fight is now over, and both players draw back up to 4 cards. Draw, pick, play. 3, 2, 1. Jericho reveals Tackle. Levi reveals a Brawl, canceling out Jericho's Tackle, so now only Levi's card will take action. Levi goes with Brawl's primary action of Wound 1. Blood has been spilled. A blood token is placed next to Jericho's mini on the board, and his Vigor drops from 2 to just 1 remaining. Vigor, Jericho 1, Levi 2. The third engagement of the fight is now over, and both players draw back up to 4 cards.
Jericho was the one who wanted to start a fight with me. But you know what? I'm gonna finish what Jericho started. I actually have a little secret card in my hand. Jericho probably thinks I'm gonna go with the Ranger, but I'm gonna surprise everybody with this. Quick draw. Three,
2, 1.
Jericho reveals a blitz, and Levi reveals a quick draw. Since neither card is cancelled, Jericho's plan as the attacker is now to use the move action of 2 listed on blitz to run from the fight in hopes of surviving. However, Levi exhausts his card to attempt the special's agility check.
If I pass this check, I get to execute my card first and deal 1 final wound to you.
Levi's agility check is a success! Quick Draw is now used to inflict 1 final wound to Jericho before Jericho's card effects can even be executed. Vigor, Jericho 0, Levi 2. And that's how fighting works. Jericho, the attacker in this PvP fight, has now lost all his vigor and feints. Looking at the reference card, you will see that the winner of a PvP match gets to loot the other. Levi may choose one option from the 5 that are listed under looting PvP. In this case, Levi was angry that Jericho attacked him, so he chooses to send him to jail. This ends Jericho's turn as he has to move to jail. Then, on the following turn, Jericho pays the $3 bail cost, and Levi is the one receiving that bail. A few final notes regarding combat. If you ever run out of combat cards to draw from, you must refresh your combat deck before drawing back up to 4. To refresh your combat deck, you choose from your current hand which cards you would like to keep, shuffle all the remaining cards with the discard pile to reform your combat deck, then draw back up to 4. If you end up fainting for any other reason other than a PvP fight, you experience loss. Loss means you drop all your resources and heads and place them in your current acre. If you fainted while committing a crime, you then go to jail. For everything else, you need to move to Doc Barber. Doc Barber, you can spend 1 grit to heal to max vigor and release. You can take the Doc Barber release action in the same turn you lost all vigor if you have enough grit remaining. As for jail, a list of crimes is described here on your reference card. Now in jail, your turn ends when you enter. You don't restore your vigor until that same night phase. At the start of the next turn, you may pay $3 to release. Any form of payment is accepted, aka resources, heads, and so on. The jail also doesn't give you any change if you pay any higher than that bail. Now, if you can't pay $3, then you lose 1 notoriety point instead.
Alright, let's finish this lesson on fighting by revisiting the use of ranged weapons.
Ranged weapons, aka any combat card that has a range of greater than 0, allow you to start a fight in an ambush. You first check line of sight. Notice here how the bank is outlined in white. The bank is immediately adjacent to the green-blue acre, the blue-yellow acre, and the green-pink acre. Levi is in the blue-yellow acre that's immediately adjacent to the bank, which means that he is within line of sight of Hannah. The rifle says ignore shelter, so it doesn't matter if she's in the bank, and it also ignores the shelter role listed. From here, Levi would spend 1 grit to start a fight, exhaust the ranged weapon card in order to ambush, which allows him to deal damage without a response. Before the fight even starts, Hannah would take 1 wound, and after that, now begins the main fight. Okay, we are reaching the end of this tutorial now. We have 2 last things to talk about: enemies and the night phase. The only difference between fighting an enemy and a player is that you'll be fighting against a non-player character or an NPC's combat deck, which is shuffled, placed down, and randomly drawn from any player on the table. There are some things to keep in mind when acting on the behalf of an NPC. If the NPC is not within range of their primary action, they will always use the card's alternate action of move 1. If they do this, they'll always pursue and move closer to their target in the shortest path possible while also maintaining line of sight. If an enemy ever has to perform a skill check to navigate an obstacle in the environment or use a weapon or a card, reference the skill levels along the bottom right of the token, not the sneak check listed on the top left. If a skill check ever requires a skill that isn't displayed on the enemy token, the enemy can't make that attempt. So let's say you damage an enemy. You put a wound token right next to them, and as soon as their vigor reaches 0, you can flip the enemy token to the other side, immediately receive the loot listed on the left side of the token, and then keep the head in your head slot of the cargo catalog, which is limited to a maximum of 3 heads at any time. The cash value listed on the right side shows the amount earned when that head is sold, or in advanced game modes when it's mounted. NPCs will also retain damage if they survive a fight after receiving wounds. So during the day, Enemy NPCs will keep to themselves unless you end your turn within line of sight and the range listed on their enemy token, and then they'll initiate a fight with you and assume the role of an attacker. If you end your turn within line of sight and range listed within the enemy's white range icon, then that means that they'll attack you immediately when your turn ends. A red range icon means that an NPC is aggressive and they'll attack you as soon as you enter within their line of sight and range, rather than wait for your turn to end. During your turn and while you're in an enemy's line of sight and range, you can attempt the sneak check listed in the top left of their token to have them ignore you until the start of your next turn. So after each player has completed their day phase one at a time in clockwise order, all players then simultaneously go through the night phase before the first player starts their next day phase, which is the beginning of the next turn. The steps of the night phase are listed on your reference card, but let's do a brief review of those steps before we end this tutorial for the game mode. Now keep in mind, if something does sound unfamiliar, it does not apply to the tutorial. Step 1 will apply more to the advanced game modes, but for fire spread, all active fire raiders will choose one of their own fires to grow by a single fire token. Step 2, weather. Some terrain tiles display a weather effect at the very bottom of the tile, and all players not in a shelter are affected or roll a die if specified. Step 3, earnings. All cabins will generate one resource matching its location, and all coins in the change row on all banknotes advance by one space. Again, this will also apply to later modes. Step 4, night actions. If there are any events or pursuits that specify something happens at night, it'll occur right now. Step 5, sleep. Everyone is then going to go to sleep, so all players reset their grit from their fatigue ticket back to the grit ticket, and all exhausted items are refitted and turned vertically. Step 6, restore. If you're in an acre that restores vigor or willpower, like the campsite in the wetlands for example, that's now going to take effect. Also, each wounded NPC will heal by 1. Keep in mind that this phase is cancelled for locations that are currently on fire. Step 7, advance the calendar. The calendar token in the town hall will advance by 1 month, and any icons or respawns listed are executed. And this is the night phase, so once the night phase is complete, the first player will begin their next day phase, and that is repeated until one of the deadly strangers are victorious. For all game modes, when a player meets win conditions, the game does not end immediately. The rest of that day phase is going to be completed, and then that player is declared winner immediately as the night phase begins, which then ends the game. In case multiple players meet the win conditions before the night phase, they must duke it out in a saloon brawl tiebreaker, a final fight to determine the true winner. And that is the tutorial for Warm Welcome. The intro to-do list has a side A and a side B, so the tutorial can be played more than once, so that way you get practice with the Bantam system. But there's always the option of jumping into the subsequent standard and advanced game modes. Either way, once you're ready for the real game, click here to see Shadow Governors. All right, everyone, that is a wrap on our Bantam West shoot. Thanks to the whole team and crew that have literally been dying out here for the past 3 months. Sorry, through, was it ice, through freaking wind today, and through crazy sun today. But I just wanted to give a quick and huge thank you to Ike and the whole team at Bantam West, Bantam Planet, for believing in this crazy project and this crazy dream. It is literally a dream project for all of us to be filming on. And we're all super excited about this game, all super excited about the video overall. And we're pumped. So thank you all. Yeah! Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah!
Thank you.